Oshrit Aviv, Francesco Bonfiglio, Eric Paul, welcome to Digital Markets Research Hub. You all specialize in the area of digital market, which is an autonomous, in a sense, well, maybe all digital markets are, each digital market is autonomous, but this one is quite distant from the majority and is of quintessential, existential nature for all other digital markets, namely cloud. So this is the topic of our conversation, and I propose maybe we can start with you, Francesco, just to explain to us, to remind for some, to explain to others why the importance of cloud is so existential these days.
Thank you. I try to be very simple in what I'm saying. Cloud per se, it's used as a word by many to express a lot of things. In reality, it's a very simple thing. It was born to become, let me say, a dematerialization of infrastructure, hardware infrastructure at the beginning. Why is that? Because actually infrastructures, so computers, servers, data centers are very expensive. It's a very capital expensive business. And when in the early 2000s, everybody started to understand the need for compute power, storage, connectivity, etc., was increasing, the choice was between, do I want to become like a telco operator or do I want to run my business? And the choice was obvious. I don't want to spend my time following the evolution of technology because technology is becoming a commodity and I have to have this commoditization in the cheapest, easiest way. The original idea of the cloud was a decentralized computing grid. That was the very original idea. It turned out to become just an outsourcing of your resources because in the end of the day, the business drives. So everybody was looking for something cheaper. And the idea that you can, dismantle your data centers, your servers, the personnel, of course, running the operations of it to reduce the cost was prevalent. Everybody thought, moving to the cloud, I'm going to spend less money. So the cost is going to be reduced. Actually, this was a very bad mistake, still is. Moving to the cloud does not reduce the cost. It's a shift of paradigm because basically moving to the cloud means making flexible, elastic, and decouple, let me say, the business from the underlying infrastructure that you need to run it. Because nowadays, 90% of the processes in every company run on IT system. You can call them IT, digital, doesn't matter, but we cannot survive without IT. Now, this preamble is important because cloud per se doesn't produce any economy. But if we didn't have the cloud, we would not have had the shift, the mind shift from IT as a cost to IT as a business driver. So now we talk about digital, but digital actually is not just technology, it is a bunch of things, including the power to use data to build new products or services or enhance existing products and services or improve existing operations to reduce cost, increase quality, etc. So the cloud per se was not important at the beginning and was even misunderstood, let me say. And it was even adopted in the wrong way and still is. But now it is the ground floor where the data economy exists because thanks to the cloud, we started to see the platforms. Platforms are these technology aggregate where you have data ingested, elaborated through algorithms and services offered. And this was thanks to the cloud. And on top of the platform, we started developing the platform economy. And most of us use a lot of platforms today. We couldn't live without them. And on top of the platform economy, we now speak about data economy. And data economy is based on the exploitation of common data spaces, basically to more freely, more easily share information and build better or new services and products on top of it. That's why cloud is important. But without knowing the history, it's like why tires are so important to mobility. Well, tires per se is rubber, but without that, we wouldn't have cars.
Many thanks, Francesco. Oshrit, I imagine it's difficult to add something to this quite really illuminated and detailed answer. Maybe a little bit in addition to what has been said by Francesco, maybe also in relation to architecture, functionality, how it works.
Yeah, it was very thorough. Sorry.
so sorry, excuse me. No, I just wanted to add on this cloud the user perspective. What is it? What does it bring? And at the end of the day, it brings better collaboration, better productivity. For instance, I'm in an airport today, and I can access all my documents to talk to you, etc. Scalability, have the best technology, etc. But there are also drawbacks to the cloud, which are tackled, cybersecurity, etc. But also we can wonder if all our data need to be in the cloud. Maybe they can be in our phone for some of them. For instance, my health record can be there, and it solves some cybersecurity issues. But clearly it has been a paradigm shift for a lot of business, large corporations, but also mom and pop businesses, which could access, have a website, start do e-commerce, etc. So that's really important. Sorry, Oshrit.
No, not at all. I actually mentioned some of the things that I thought. Francesco's presentation was very thorough. I would add on the business side, I would say yes, scalability and flexibility, of course. We're also talking about enhanced computing power, which is something that is very relevant today when we're talking about AI and we're talking about big data and massive data analysis. So on a business perspective, we're talking about enhancement in computing power. I think we can talk about the cost maybe later on in the questions that Francesco mentioned, reduce cost versus, are we talking about reduced costs? And just adding a little bit on what Eric said in terms of all the sync as a user perspective, all the syncs and collaboration. It's something that also on a business perspective, it's very relevant. And on the privacy side, privacy and security side, which is mostly my expertise, we do have the advantages and the drawbacks, but the advantages of backup business continuity and disaster recovery, which are imminent parts of cybersecurity when we talk about crisis management. Yeah, I will let you go ahead with the questions, but I think it was quite a thorough answer.
Absolutely, Oshrit. Thank you very much. So let us revert to another question. And again, starting with you, Francesco, then maybe continued by you, Eric, and you, Oshrit. So the order I propose like this, as we started already spontaneously. So it appears to be that it's a kind of the industry is growing very quickly, and thus the entry costs are getting higher and higher. What is the level of that's the conventional wisdom that only a handful of companies are capable to offer reliable service. But on the other hand, one might say that it's not the case. Can you enlighten us from maybe technical side how hard it is to compete? What's the level of competition? What are the prospects for new entrants? Is the market getting more and more entrenched? Maybe who are the main players?
It's a very articulated question. Actually, it's not that simple, because the implicit question is why we are hostage of a handful of main cloud providers. Somebody calls them gatekeepers, somebody else calls them hyperscalers. Let me make it very clear. Everybody successful in the market is just great. So the incumbent cloud platforms that we have today, namely we're talking about Amazon AWS, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform, are the best technology stacks that have ever been put together in the market. So Is there a problem in Europe, just to talk about Europe, because we are, in Europe or in Israel, it doesn't matter, but is there a problem elsewhere in the world to build something similar? Of course not. I mean, for God's sake, let me say the collective intelligence and the skills that we have all over the world are more than sufficient. And actually, I have to be honest, most of the patents behind the cloud of the American providers come from outside of America, comes from Europe. So there is not a problem of skills. There is certainly a problem of scale. We don't have any as big as the American cloud providers in other parts of the world, Europe, and not only. And there is also a problem of, let me say, understanding why cloud is so important and why, therefore, some clouds are better than others. We discussed a little bit, and Oshrit, she introduced some other important topics of why cloud is so important. But why somebody uses one type of cloud versus another? Let me list you, just from gut feeling, some of the reasons. One is that everybody uses it. This is called brand. We are missing new brands. We are basically also psychologically tied to 3 brands. Right or wrong, that doesn't matter, but this is a great marketing operation, and it's a great result of those companies having done very well in the market. 2 is the availability of resources everywhere. And they have been great, expanding all over the world, providing their resources in a very uniform way. 3 is the standards. No one uses the same standards, but inside those single houses, you have the full stack totally integrated and one single standard. And they've been very great developing free training and certification programs to make sure that they can develop skills in the market. Now, put yourself in the shoes of a customer. I want to buy the best cloud system integrator in the world. How do I measure him or it? How many certifications do you have? Okay, what are the certifications available? Microsoft, Amazon, Google. Deal. You know what I mean? They build an ecosystem where you are not only economically tied in the market, but you are also, I would say, socially tied. They are acting actually on the new generation. They are providing an extremely easy to use and extremely well-integrated platform for software developers, which are the key actors. The ones that build digital are the developers. They are not, with all the due respect, the managers, the policymakers. And they make life easier for those people. So to make something similar, we need to build something like that elsewhere. And I think this is possible, but I don't want to take all the time. But I think I lost a little bit also the original question. I hope I answered at least a bit of it. I will pass to my fellow.
I would like to respond to a few things that Francesco just mentioned. I will start from the end because he said, how do we build something similar? And my question is, do we want to build something similar, right? We have something that someone built 10, 15 years ago. You want to think ahead. This is one thing that I think is also, yesterday, Oles asked us about recommendations to students. And I think ahead and innovate is something that's relevant for any type of student and economy. So we'll start from that. And I think this is something that is, I see as very European, right? We look at what others build and we say, oh, it's not fair. We want to build the same, right? And we're trying to copy. If it's not fair, let's try to build something that is fair, that is better, right? You called it good marketing. I think it's also good product, and I think it's also good service. Otherwise, you can have the best marketing you want. It's not sustainable. Only marketing is not sustainable to stay in the market and build economy. So I will go to the beginning of what you said, and let's ask why, right? Why they are here, why they are so big, why we're using them. And we need to take into account that we're talking about infrastructure, right? So you only need a few courageous actors to start and build something that is very expensive to build, right? And it's true, we need to give them the benefit of actually demonstrating that it's worth it with market, and then open the market for innovation. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the concept of BOT contracts. It's build, operate, transfer. It's normally in infrastructure for countries, right? I don't know. We have it in Israel. I'm sure in Europe and the US there is as well, where the country wants private actors, private players to spend and develop for years infrastructure, so everybody will be able to benefit this. So the country gives them, these private players, the opportunity to operate this exclusively for a few years until they break even and make some revenue. And then they open the market. They allow other players to use the infrastructure, right? And offer the models, what you call, Francesco, marketing. Now show me what you can build on top, how you can approach the market, go to market, and how you can sustain and retain the market. So I'm partially agree with this approach and partially want to suggest a different outlook on it. And the last thing that I wanted to say is that, yes, why? Because as you said, they reach out to the right market sector, they invest, they have good marketing, they have good product. And the last thing that I think is very interesting to mention, when you think of a small business innovation, right? We're talking about the startup ecosystem, and we're talking about the small, medium. They have few consideration when they choose their vendor, right? As you mentioned here, and we will mention a lot, interoperability with other players in the ecosystem, prices, how easy it is to start, and regulation. Now, after GDPR, we have regulation. I can tell you that I sit with companies all the time, advising them from infrastructure through architecture, through product. And they're like, hey, we must use the AWS or Azure because I don't know GDPR. And now, you know, it's like it's a Bible that small companies do not have the luxury to learn. And they assume, I don't say if it's right or wrong, that if we use AWS or Microsoft or Google, which has a lower market share, then we're okay with regulation. We don't need to invest our own investigation and assess small vendors because maybe small vendors don't have the right compliance because they don't have the resources. So I just wanted to mention this because I think it's something that will come again. And I'm sorry, Eric, maybe if you want to add on top of it.
Yeah, well, of course, Oshrit. Well, to add to what you just said, nobody has been fired because this IT person decided to use AWS for the cloud. But if you go for an alternative little player and something goes wrong, then you have a lot of heat on yourself. So that's definitely a factor. Another one is also the way cloud is working. If you're simply building a data center and putting infrastructure, etc., you're going to invest a lot of money, but you won't be successful. Why? Because now we have many layers which have been put, intelligence that is added on your data analytics, etc. And with AI, it will go even further. And so I agree with you, Oshrit, that we shouldn't copy what is being done. First of all, because we cannot do it. When you look at market capitalization of those guys, clearly nobody in Israel, in Europe, wherever can do the same. But we can have a different approach, and this is where we can do things by being specialized, by cooperating between companies, by creating a network. But if we say, okay, let's forbid AWS, Azure from European countries, it simply won't work. And one of the key reasons is because I don't know any European country who doesn't have public data, public infrastructure running on software, on infrastructure, sorry, on cloud from those guys. So we need to, first of all, to make sure that they comply because they are here, and they are here to stay. But we can use our innovation and agility as well by being smaller to create new services and introduce them more rapidly into market. And well, remember how the little Asterix and Obelix, in Brittany, they grouped forces. They had, of course, they had some special potion, magical potion, but it was really the fact of working together that can give this agility.
This is amazing. We will have the next question about what Oshrit mentioned, how to do it. So doing things differently and adapting to the newly emerging circumstances. The architecture was designed 10, 15 years ago, etc. That's a separate question requiring your articulated reflection. But I wanted to ask a follow-up question to the things which you have mentioned, Eric, primarily, but I think Francesco and Oshrit as well, namely, what is the situation in other jurisdictions, those who are much less open? Maybe they sit on huge massive of data. Do we see some trends which are remarkable, which are important at least to be aware of in the more kind of, let's say, state-centered polities parts of the world, or it's pretty much the same with some nuances which are rather quantitative than qualitative? If you could mention some interesting examples for us at least to be aware of.
I can give it a start if you want. Yes, I wanted to quickly catch up on on the why, because I think this is useful also on the what we can do next. It's worth to mention that the reason why these players have become so big is common to the three. Cloud for them is not a primary business. It started as a secondary business. This is very important to understand. So Amazon makes all sales and logistics, and they developed such a big logistic infrastructure and IT system that they decided to leverage it. Microsoft sells products. They decided to build, again, a huge IT infrastructure, and they decided to leverage it. Google sells advertising, and again. So this is interesting because if you think about it, there is no other company in the world that did the same. Why? It's a good question, but they were smart, understanding, leveraging what you have in a secondary business is a good thing to do. Let's keep this in mind because I will suggest some ideas on what we can do better. Now, let's go back to the point you were making about the states. Again, one point that Oshrit mentioned is about compliance, and that's what I mean by marketing. People believe that if they adopt Microsoft or AWS, they are compliant by definition. Truth is not, and it's not me saying it. There is 2 sentences from the Court of Justice of Europe, and there is lots of legal information that simply explain, since more than 10 years, that the Cloud Act, which is a law in the United States regulating the access by the public authorities to information in case of investigations, the Cloud Act allows any US Marshal to just access data on any, let me say, European citizen or non-US citizen having data on American platforms, or on any American platform, any American data platform sitting on the US territory, or any data not sitting in the US territory, but managed directly or indirectly by American companies. In a nutshell, they can do whatever they want on any data all over the planet. So Europe said, sorry, this is not compliant, let me say, to our GDPR. So people might believe that adopting a Microsoft platform is GDPR compliant. Reality, legally speaking, it is not. But Eric correctly said, there is no single public administration not using one of those platforms. Believe me, public sector, governments, and institutions, they are totally aware of the problem. Simply, they don't have a solution. They don't have an alternative. That's the bare truth. Now, this is to partially answer your question. There is a strong movement. I've been leading Gaia-X for years. So the willingness to have digital sovereignty is very strong. The ability to translate this objective into concrete actions to bring digital sovereignty has not been achieved yet, in my honest opinion. Why? Because in Europe, for example, to mention something I know very well, the decision was to focus the effort on hyper-regulation. The result was that we have a lot of regulation that most of the SMB, which is 80% of the European economy, cannot even understand, cannot afford even understanding, that is creating even a bigger block, even a bigger roadblock to utilize any non-American platforms, because actually the American platforms are the only ones that can afford the legal offices to demonstrate they are compliant to any sort of regulation. So we are kind of shooting on our feet, and that's not good in Europe. A lot of money has been spent, and I'm talking about hundreds of billions, trying to create sovereignty for the Digital Europe program. We're talking about 9 billion. The recovery funds, digital part is 150 billions. And I can mention another dozens of millions in other spread programs. The problem in Europe, which is not like Israel or United States, is that there is a law that impede public investments of private initiatives and endeavors. And this is strangling us, because we cannot spend money of the European citizens just with European companies. And somebody may laugh about it, but this is the reality. Not only our antitrust and competition law forces any public tender to be open to any player. And that's why some economists say that in the best case, 50% of the money we are spending on digital will go over the ocean, because any digital project implies the usage of those data cloud platforms, and they are still prevalent. And there is no way to impede them to bid or be used by the bidders. So you see, we are between a rock and a hard place in Europe. The difference in other countries, I don't know all of them, but I can tell you that in the United States, the approach is completely different. They want to invest in AI. They say, okay, which are the best 3-4 startups we can invest on? Okay, let's put a chip of $500 million on each one. 3 of them will fail, 1 will succeed. And once they are big enough in the market, they let them go and protect them through their lobbies. In Europe, we don't have any European lobby. We don't have any European brand of technology. We don't have the critical mass necessary to compete. And we didn't have, let me say, the entrepreneurial instinct to invest in this direction like those American companies did. A Siemens, a BMW, a Bosch kind of company could have done what Amazon did. Yes, of course, but this did not happen. And I think this is also the son of a kind of a mindset we have in Europe, where most of the companies believe, well, somebody has to think about it, institutions. And then we have a renewal of a government every 3 months, if you think about it. And the commission starts operating after 3 months they have been in charge, and they change everything that was done before, and then they start campaigning for the next election. So this is not effective. So there is awareness, there is a clash in particular due to the antitrust and the law of public funding to private initiatives. And there is a passive market that expects something to happen from the top. This will never happen. We need entrepreneurial action, and we need to leverage on existing assets. That will pause here, because I have something to say after.
No, you're right. And with my former background in investments, that's clear. In the US, it's adventure capital, and in Europe, it's more capital risk, as in France. So there's this. There's also the way that we react to failure. A lot of VCs in the US won't invest in an entrepreneur if he hasn't failed before. In Europe, it's exactly the opposite. But there's still a light at the end of the tunnel, because when we compare the level of money invested in US VC and European VC, obviously there's a huge gap. But there needs to be a political willingness on this, because when you compare the overall assets under management between the US and Europe, the difference is way smaller. It means that if our pension funds or our public pensions, etc., by political will, were forced to invest or motivated to invest in, let's say, 1% of their assets under management into innovation, then we would have way more money that we could invest in startups, help them to scale, because that's one of the problems. We have small investment, fairly small investment funds, and once a company is successful, their weight in the portfolio of the VC fund is way too high, and they cannot get more money to scale. And where do they scale? They scale in the US. So we need to tackle this issue, and I guess that the next commission should carefully look into this, because otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of money that is trickling back to the US. What our competitive advantage can be, well, with Francesco, you mentioned GDPR, but also for cloud, companies are very interested to make sure that their IP is safe, that it's not going to be taken away, etc. And I guess that it's in this area that we can think smartly to develop new services, and also well, of course, there's cloud, but I was showing my phone earlier on, saying that data could be there, but it's also cloud and edge computing that can do a lot. Obviously, AWS, Azure, etc. They aren't happy about edge, but when edge will really increase, well, they will adapt to it. So maybe we should start from there here in Europe by bringing alternative architecture, alternative usage.
Thank you very much. Eric, Oshrit?
Not much to add, just that Francesco was talking a lot about the innovative or the entrepreneurship spirit in Europe. I tend to agree. I would just add that, yes, Europe is not only lacking the as you called it, the spirit. I think you can create the spirit. I think it's lacking the incentives to shift the mindset, because you're right. In my opinion, the mindset right now is we expect the government to take care of the important services, whether they are day-to-day or digital, and I think that's where the mindset shift can help. I also think, I don't know if it's for this question, I will just put it here for a second, maybe open this market for innovation and competition. Doesn't necessarily mean to build the infrastructure from scratch. Maybe it means licensing the infrastructure and open this as a marketplace for innovative players, and shift the competition and the innovation in Europe to this area. And I'm saying this because it's really painful for me what Francesco said about the tax money amounts that are going for these attempts that could be utilized for advancement. That's I'm saying as a not a citizen, but if I was a citizen perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Oshrit. So the next question was about federated model, but there is a follow-up on the follow-up. Namely, you have highlighted many really important, not only problems, not only the description of the problem, the diagnosis, but also some solutions. And it looks it as maybe a simplistic reflection on this is that to scale up, we need somehow to consolidate the vision. There must be a political will. It should be less fragmented. Am I interpreting you, Francesco, too frivolously? Then correct me. That it's too fragmented. There is no continuity, or not enough continuity, no strategic projection of investment initiatives, and supposedly there is also a little pan-European vision, because we still have conflict between member states understanding of this, I don't know, 2.0, 3.0 industrial policy in these sectors. Is it Is it something which is treatable, or it's something which we have to learn and adapt and somehow try to reinvent a different model? Maybe it's a nice way to revert to the issue of federated model. So if you can combine the answer to both questions in one, it's absolutely fine as well.
I will try. Yes, the answer is yes. But I tell you why we need a federated model. Because like I said before, if the most successful businesses were started as secondary businesses leveraging on necessary infrastructure for the primary business, we can do the same in Europe, and we must do the same because the future infrastructures will have to be distributed, decentralized, scalable horizontally, not just vertically, so completely orthogonal to what was built by the American infrastructures. That's why the Americans are starting to change the model. They are starting to build regional regions, and they're starting to talk about licensing their technologies because they understand there is no way to survive in a hyper-centralized world of data because data is everywhere. So data gravity moves the problem all around the world. Now, in this situation, Europe and other countries have an opportunity because the fragmentation and the distribution, the localization, which is a good word, fragmentation is a bad word, the localization of resources we have is unique. We have proximity to the culture, we have proximity to the heritage of the customer, we have proximity to the language, we have proximity of many small players. No one of them can compete, but all of them can be aggregated through a virtual, let me say, integration platform that really provides for the critical mass we need, the spread of offering that nobody has alone, the interoperability that nobody wants to provide. And I truly believe this will not happen through a one, as big as it is, new European champion. So I'm not a believer at all that we need big European champions because I don't want to force the market into the choice between an American lock-in versus a European lock-in. That doesn't work. The choice must be, I want to move my workload, I want to use the cloud resources wherever possible in the most interoperable way, with the freedom to move my workload in and out, and possibly I want to find the best of breed solutions and not just always the same three. The reason I decided to step out, for example, from Gaia-X and do it from a private association, partially answer your question. I reached the point that I reached the conclusion that this cannot happen through the institutions because of the reasons I said before. Unless the institutions drastically change their approach. In other words, unless we start a real Airbus of the cloud, which means not just talk about something, but build a factory and put public money into building what we need. I'm not just talking just infrastructure, hardware. I'm talking about cloud services that sustain the data economy. Unless a digital Airbus is built in Europe, the rest will be discussions and lost money. So the market knows exactly what I'm talking about. The market operators are risking their life. They will vanish. The market share of the European cloud service provider dropped down from 26% to 10% since 2017. So they have another 3 to 5 years. Then they will close the shop or become resellers of American technologies. So they know they have to do something. The smaller ones, they don't know how to do, and they are looking for capitals outside. The best innovative startups we have, they are basing their idea, their intellectual property, yet on the same American platforms because they have no alternatives. So we need to build an alternative. The alternative cannot be driven by the institutions. So I decided to build a platform that enables the aggregation and the commercial federation of these people. But my hope is that one day the institutions open their eyes and say, wow, this can be an Airbus. Let's invest money into it. But I could not wait. So as small as I can be with the partners I have, I'm running faster than any other initiative like the IPSI or the Digital Europe program or Gaia-X itself, I have to admit. I can be faster, I can choose my rules, I can choose my participants, and I can go in the right direction. without being hijacked by non-European interest, without being absorbed by the legal clashes and conflicts between the different countries having different point of view about our dependency on American platforms, without being, disrupted by the next pandemic, we hope not, war, conflict, whatever. So I believe we need to move bottom up. In other words, starting from the industry, aggregating people that really want to make something different and attracting the attention of the policymakers. And of course, I hope that the new elected parliament will be attentive and understand that we need a new approach in the European Commission. One last comment I wanted to make is that I believe we should stop looking at cloud and digital in general as technology. We should start looking at digital as a strategic transnational network, strategic transnational infrastructure to sustain European economy. At the same level of power grids, mobility networks, or streets, roads, healthcare systems, education system, you name it. We should invest in protecting this because it's the most critical asset to sustain and support the future of our economy. And of course, not just in Europe.
A quick question. What's the difference between European champion and Airbus? How do you see, because you are against the attempt to build a European champion, but still
I'm in favor of the Airbus approach because the Airbus bypassed the limitation of making public investments in market private initiative, commercial initiatives. That was the right approach. Otherwise, Europe would never win the battle with the lobbies of McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, let's be honest. So it was a great success. But of course, you have to have something that works. And building yet another hyperscaler will not work because the world of data is hyper-distributed and because we don't want to create another big lock-in with a European plate on top of it. Instead, I'm a strong believer in the federated model where we invest in, let's say, infrastructure, in platforms and protocols that can allow multiple players to join together. This will create a snowball effect because we're gonna try to do the bigger and the smaller ones, and it will never end. It will be open, everybody will be in competition, but everybody will leverage the others. So it's a collaborative, cooperative model that I think is the only possible. The three big players are owning the market, but when they will see that the market is creating a real competitor, they will change approach. Now they have no interest, even in collaborating. You can imagine that if they really wanted to help us, they started creating collaboration across the three of them, there would be no game over. If they decide to really collaborate and interoperate, it's game over. Why they don't do it? Because they feel strong enough to keep us hostage. So the only way not to be hostage is to build something completely different and that can grow in an exponential way, aggregating anyone who wants to be part of it, but doing it from the ground up. So really integrating and leveraging on existing assets, not waiting to build new ones and not hoping in the advent of the next big European champion.
Thank you very much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And you were talking about Airbus. Also, Airbus wasn't started from scratch. In many countries, in France, in the UK, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, we had companies who had already a lot of know-how building either planes or engines and things like that, and all those assets were brought together into Airbus. So that was the important point. On the federated system, at MyData, we want to move things from a level to another. For instance, for individual, move them from formal rights to actionable rights. For instance, GDPR, Article 10, you have data portability. Have you already tried to port your data thanks to Article 20? No, it doesn't work. So we want to move to actionable rights that we may have. Also from data protection, say, okay, data protection is a good thing, but we want data empowerment. For instance, if I have my health data, I can have a better health because I will become an actor of my health. And if, to put the two together, if for European SMEs, GDPR was not a cost, but an investment, because it enables them to create new products, new services, that would be obviously interesting. And I'll move to the third point, which is the closed ecosystem, then the lock-in, etc. Move it to open ecosystem. And why does it make sense? Because all companies have plenty of data that they don't use. You talk to a CEO, they say, "Oh, my data has a lot of value." Well, if you use your data, yes. If you don't use them, the value is zero. But some of your data may not really be useful for you, but they may be useful aggregated with data from other people. And this is where the federated system makes sense. But for this to happen, you need to have a trust framework so that you're sure that your data is used for what you allow it to be used for, and not for something else. And if those data can improve, I don't know, response through aggregating satellite data and data of IoT or data coming from people's phones when there's a natural disaster, for instance. Well, that's certainly a use of data that is more interesting than just feeding an algorithm that will push advertising to you. And also this federated approach, I compare it to neurons. You know, the more active your neurons, the more connections you have. And this is where, well, Europe is famous for its SMEs. And SMEs, I mean, the barrier to entry is very high. They cannot decide to be a new AWS or a new Google or even a new Spotify. But by a federated system, the little fishes together can have more power and be more agile, because we have technology advances quicker and quicker. And if we are more agile, then we can hopefully, to build a stronger competitive advantage.
Thank you, Eric. Oshrit?
I don't have much to add on the topic of federated versus decentralized. So actually, I was a listener in this question.
I'm still trying to. So in order to have it function, so we still, as an idea, it sounds very attractive. It's like, you know, it's akin to the idea of Anu Bradford, of that we have 3 digital empires, and or rather, the idea that Europe is doing it in a different way, that we have to be ethically mindful, and we will ultimately develop something which is not very aggressively commercially exploiting all the devices, or let's say all our instincts. We will do it in a more noble way. That would be kind of European vision. And we will not be doing it in an authoritarian way, which is the only apparent alternative. So do we have to do it? Do we have to combine doing things differently with the need to scale up? Should we develop? Is it a must to have it to do it in the European way, or maybe it's important to sit on something which has been already developed by our American counterparts?
Yeah, well, let me give you an example, because if we say that it's for the beauty or for the principles, clearly that's not a very good point for a business model. You have farmers. You have a small farmer in your village. If he goes to the market on his own, etc., he may not get the best deal. If, however, he groups with other farmers, creating cooperatives, for instance, then he will have better negotiating power, etc. And this is something that has happened already in Europe with SWIFT. You know, the international payment system. What was the solution? It was to say, okay, we put banks together, and we are going to enable them to make international transfers. And well, SWIFT also decided to establish itself as a cooperative. Why? Because they thought very smartly. Okay, if a bank is making a transfer of 10 euros. Well, at that time it wasn't euros; it was more Belgian francs or lira or etc. Or if we are making a transfer for 10 million of the same monetary unit, the technology is exactly the same. So we have the same cost. Okay. And if they had decided to have an approach which was more like the vendor lock-in approach, etc., they would have said, "Oh no, we're going to charge a percentage of the amount transferred." And then what would have happened? They realized that they would, if they were to do this, they would take value away from their clients, the banks. So the banks, because they had just a technical cost to pay for the bank transfer, they came on board, and the system became global. And I think that we can, or look at GSM for data sharing. We can create a standard that will develop. And if we look at at banks, clearly, if the objective in transferring money was to make money immediately on this, it would have failed. So we create an infrastructure, and then each player, the players in this infrastructure, are all have the incentives to create this. But in terms of approach, and well, why do I think that it's a good competitive advantage for Europe is that clearly it's not in the mindset of the US for the time being with vendor lock-in, etc., and winner takes all. But we need to move, and we need to move fast, because if they realize that there's really money to be made through this system, they will find a way to use it.
The one last point in this regard, and inspired by, again, Francesco's comments, we tend to agree with each other. Maybe the combination of the European mindset and having the government or the federation, union, initiating, defining the need, defining the strategy, initiating the project based on the needs and a basic funding, but open innovation. I'm sure you're all aware of the concept. Eric, I think you're doing this. Francesco, you as well with Gaia-X. Open innovation, and just create the right incentives and the infrastructures for private players, small, agile, to compete, right? And to actually leverage. So combining the federated and the governmental model with the agile and fast. And this way, I think, both achieving the KPIs of creating infrastructure, competition to the American players, but also starting to shift this mindset towards creating the innovative approach, the entrepreneurial approach, and to what I think as a side effect, the byproduct will happen is what also Francesco mentioned, seeing the digital market and the innovation market as a commodity, as a basic infrastructure that government taking care of by incentivizing private actors. Again, going back to models like BOT, if we're talking about infrastructure, but not only. That's it.
Okay.
There's one point we didn't mention, but that builds on what Oshrit just said. That's the quality of data. And with a federated system, with a trust framework, you can have better data, or data more fitted to what you want to do. If we talk about AI, it can be frugal AI, which rather than scraping everything on the internet, actually accesses good quality data and acts on it. So that's also another potential advantage of federated systems.
Yeah, and maybe if I can add a bit on top of everything was said, is totally correct. But the key question comes and say, why companies, because we are talking about market operators, larger or smaller, doesn't matter, they want to get together. Why they should decide to cooperate? Because the cooperative model, in the example that Eric and I have been talking about it, made, the farmers It's the most ancient economical model. So when you are small but excellent, either way, you die, or you cooperate with others, and all of a sudden you can sell your apples, but as well bananas and pears and other stuff that you don't grow, and you survive. The same is happening for the cloud service providers and the cloud service, the digital service providers in general, in Europe and in other parts of the world. This is true also in Africa, it's true also in the Middle East. We didn't touch it, but I can tell you that they have the same problem. And believe me, it's true also in the United States. It's incredible how many initiatives are growing in the United States try to get rid of this hegemony. But anyway, we have reached a point now, maybe 10 years ago, nobody would have cared about a cooperative model because they felt they could succeed. Now people are, hitting the roof and say, well, we can't make anymore, so we need to work together. Second point, why this has not happened. I told you why the institutions did not start it, and unfortunately this is constrained by the law. But again, there are exceptions. Airbus was an exception. What they do in the United States is an exception. What they do in Israel is an exception. So sometimes maybe we can follow exceptions. Why not? But anyway, let's hope it will happen. But there's another reason. If you think about, if you want to implement this collaboration, federation kind of thing, it's not regulation. It's not open standard. Somebody has to put the money to build something that will be useful to everybody, not to itself. How many people you know that invest on something that they will not gain directly out of it? That's why this is difficult. Nobody wanted to put the money in something that everybody will benefit from. We need a utility platform. And that's what I'm trying to do. And believe me, it's extremely difficult and I cannot survive forever. I hope that I will be, showing good enough results to convince someone that, well, maybe that's worthwhile spending some of the money that we are wasting in other non-fruitful initiatives. But there is reasons why this has not happened. It's not because nobody believed in it. Everybody wanted it, but somebody has to start. The state cannot do it, but everybody believes the state should do it. And some years ago, this was not perceived as vital or necessary. Nowadays, it is. I can tell you the largest European companies in cloud are OVH in France, Ionos in Germany, Aruba in Italy, and the others are smaller, but I'm talking about companies 200, 500 millions up of revenues. They know and they decided to collaborate. And this is the first time ever. They know they will die if they don't start working together. So it's a change. It's a historical change, let me say.
Let me continue with this, adding this temporal dimension. You said that 10 years ago, the situation was very different. So what is on the horizon? AI, I imagine, all this quantum stuff. Can you maybe contextualize to us and explain why this window, opportunity window is shrinking somehow, and why it will be more and more difficult, or maybe not, to, what was the right word, consolidate or collaborate in a format which would allow you to create more or less interoperable communication interaction between different processes and protocols and infrastructure, and having some probably unified interface or some quasi-centralized consolidator who would somehow channel utility. You mentioned, Francesco, as a term for this. So what is waiting for us in 24, 25? What should be done, maybe even?
Yeah. Honestly, somebody knows I'm obsessed by this, but I can tell you that now I'm not the only one. We have an urgency. We need to urgently get rid of the control that this big data platform can exercise on our data. People don't see it, but this is conditioning everything. So the Ukraine war was funded by organizations like, Microsoft and the satellite network of Tesla, Elon Musk, sorry. And this is just an example. So the economical interests behind the data platform are so huge that are going to compromise the legal orders and the economical orders of the world. And we see it every day. So when we see, suggestions from our applications, web browsers, etc., that basically are derived by the inference on our data, we realize the power of this platform. What's ahead of us? I told you already something. In the next 3 to 5 years, we will have ended the recovery funds program and the Digital Euro program, which was supposed to last 1 decade, from 2020 to 2030. We are halfway through. No tangible results have been produced yet. So I'm not expecting any change in the European economy of data. Actually, the opposite. The cloud market is growing 2 digits year over year, and the European cloud service providers are reducing their market share 2 digits year over year. That means we will be totally controlled by 3 platforms. 80% or 90% of the data we decide to make available will be under the control of these entities.
And are you talking about European markets data, this shrinking and
of course, all the data we make available, we decide to make available. I decide to make available my emails, my WhatsApp chats, whatever, will be controlled by platforms that are out of the European jurisdiction. And when I say this, be careful, because these companies, Google is the smallest, it's got $2 trillion dollars capitalization. The biggest European cloud service provider, which is Ionos, has got 4 billion market capitalization. OVH has got 2 billion. So where do we want to go? Europe altogether has less citizens than the customer base of any of these platforms. So if they decide they want to apply their rules and not comply to the European jurisdiction or digital regulation, they will have the power and strength to do it. But they don't even have to do it because they already own the market. They are controlling the market. The next 10 years will be driven by AI-centric services. So you can imagine that people look at AI and still think about, generative AI, ChatGPT, Claude, and all this stuff. This is toys for the boys. Reality is AI is already running under our feet, because actually every time you buy something, you have a suggestion engine which is talking to an Atom that is already negotiating a price with another Atom that is the interface of another company. So the negotiations of the things we buy and the suggestions we receive is already controlled by inference on data and autonomous. It can be robotic process automation, it can be already intelligent robots that take decisions for us. All the social media are influencing campaigns, election campaigns are influencing information. Everybody has seen what happened with the Trump elections. Everybody can see the power of the social media. Social media can change the mood, can change, the behavior of the exchange market. So we need to stop looking at these data platforms as, yes, maybe we need to partner with these American companies because they're too strong. Why? We cannot build a European chip. Stop looking at it as technology. This is going to be a new order for our civil societies, and there is no way out of it. So first of all, we need to retake control on a completely different, even open type of data platform and infrastructure of our data. Second, we need to start investing on AI that makes use of qualified data and our data. And that's very important because I give you one stupid example. We have been through the pandemic and we know the power of vaccines. Now, can you imagine what happened if the vaccine testing, which now is made 70% digitally, so using basically simulation, using the patient data, if those data are not both from countries where it is illegal to sell personal data. Where they are bought in other countries, which do not reflect, let me say, our DNA completely. This is already a risk. This is already a risk. There is a market growing in the UK because they moved out the GDPR, so they are more flexible to, sell public data. There is a market in China because they can decide to sell whatever data they want. For God's sake, there is not a market in Europe and also in Israel, but you can imagine that the business will not care. They will buy the data wherever it is, they will use the AI algorithms wherever they are, and they will not care about the platforms. And we will reach the point where we are totally out of control in a few years. I'm not expecting more than 10 years than that. I hope that this is not going to be a war. Of course, nobody hopes that. But you can imagine being totally dependent on a single country or even a single operator for natural gas, oil, water, electricity, education. And now you can imagine that digital platforms are all these things together. I don't want to live in that world. I don't know you, but I'm scared to hell.
Yeah, and there's also another issue, which is that the sustainability of the system. You were talking about DNA in another context, but for the moment, we don't have enough calculation power on the planet to sequence the genome of every single habitant of the planet. So it means that big may not be the solution. I was talking about frugal AI. That's clearly important to have the right quality of data, to have an efficient AI, but an efficient AI that will have a low carbon footprint. Also on the platforms, etc. On ChatGPT, Microsoft employees have the right for 30 days to look at the prompts that you used when you were using ChatGPT. It's valid for individuals, it's valid for companies as well. And it creates also some questions about access to, well, if you are preparing a meeting or etc. and you are very important meeting and you are using ChatGPT and you prompt it with information, do you know that Microsoft employees can look at it for 30 days? So clearly there's space for another approach. And the good news and the bad news is that in the US, more and more businesses are aware of this. So if it's European companies that build new approaches, all the better for us. But once this movement has gone forward in the US, it will be American companies that will get there, just like AT&T was broken up at some point, and others, etc. I think that so the call for the next commission is definitely implement, and support the build of new champions, where there are individual companies or grouping of other companies, etc., to make sure that we create new services, not just new rights, but new services and a new value and new jobs for our kids who are now in university. And if there are only opportunities to go and work for Amazon and Google, it may be good for them, but I'm not so sure. So yes, there's a window of opportunity, but it won't be open for very, very long.
Thank you, Eric. Oshrit?
If we have time, I will just add, on the note of Francesco, I'm also scared to be in this world, but I think we're already there. The word that trade data, use data to change reality, to brainwash politics, society, I feel it. You all know what's going on in Israel. I feel it on my day-to-day, including on a personal note, I lived in Europe until a few months ago, and I felt risk for my life because of social media and propaganda in social media. So we're already in this world. I do think there are opportunities. I don't know if it's just the last window. I also think that there's only limited ability to control the data on top of these opportunities, because it's not a vacuum, right? Data is a fluctuated thing. It's something that is intangible. something that is harder to control, to validate, to make sure the quality. The European initiatives are very interesting in this regard, but data is something that by its nature is universal. So I'm actually curious to see on that. And in terms of opportunities, I think that the next opportunities is, you ask about Gen AI and quantum, then yes, making a platform for quantum computing power. Maybe if we're talking about AI and if we're talking about the next infrastructure, if it's even something that relevant to Europe in terms of environmental and sustainability regulation and policies. Also AI training platform. Maybe if you're trying to control the data, but also opportunities to create the training models to also control the how, not only the what it processes. I'm very curious to see if Europe will be agile enough to take advantage of these opportunities. I think there are plenty, not just one, but I think there are plenty.
Oshrit, but you know best probably, or very well at least, the example of Israel. Is there would you suggest on the top of your head some starting differences or maybe something which we can adopt or avoid doing on the contrary? Would you suggest some interesting examples maybe?
Israel, in terms of how mentioned COVID, or we mentioned innovation, or we mentioned the war. Israel in what terms?
Clouds mainly, but obviously these things are interrelated.
Yeah, I don't think we have a interesting cloud platform. We have small players, but in terms of innovation and incentives, I can just say that in terms of mindset of the population and the businesses, the mindset is very focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. And I can tell you that we have all the infrastructure for this. For example, I moved back to Israel a few months ago. I already started an initiative with 2 partners aside of my current consulting. We already familiar and been in few events of the Authority of Innovation. It's a governmental authority that try to create more investment in deep technology, deep tech, because this is what we define as the oil. So you already have funding. They created events. We also talk about the Federated, such the Cooperative Model. They create frameworks where small to medium players can connect together to apply for funding or grants, or you also have it in Europe. I know there are many funds and grants, but all I'm saying is that the entire infrastructure ecosystem, very facilitating of this innovation and creating and take the risk. The ecosystem is not only the grants, it's not only the mindset, it's also the law, the legislation, the labor law, the tax law, any piece of this infrastructure. So that's my 2 cents of what I'm always very vocal when I'm talking with European forums, is the part of the incentives, reduce the friction for the innovators, right?
I wanted to close this conversation with mentioning something which I should have been mentioned at the very beginning, that it originated partly thanks to Pencho Kuzev, who has organized and contracted an our Stiftung to organize this data summit on annual or biannual basis. And we managed to exchange some tentative preliminary ideas there. And so the necessary acknowledgement should be sent to Pencho for his remarkable work. We have the tradition closing the conversation with your recommendations to students. Maybe you have some idea, or you definitely do have, but maybe you have some generous recommendation to those who's just at the beginning of their career, who would help them to learn from others rather than learning from their own mistakes, and maybe not to waste too much time on generating this experience from their own mistakes. Let's start with Francesco again.
The best recommendations come from my own experience. So I could say, try to grow bottom up. Don't try to achieve, high roles from the beginning, because otherwise you would be, if you want to manage something, make sure you know what you're going to manage. And the second is, you know where you start, you don't know where you will land, and that's not a problem. Which means don't try to go one direction if you're not sure. Zigzag is okay. You can make a slalom, you can maybe step back and step up. That's not a problem at all. And the last thing is, never stop thinking. There is no stupid questions. There is no stupid solutions. There is no such a way like, okay, if I thought about this, for sure somebody else has already thought and discarded it. Don't do that. Always be critical and ask questions, because this is the only way to change things. If you expect that somebody has already had the right idea, sorry to say, it's wrong. We need people with ideas.
Many thanks indeed, Eric.
Well, probably remember that you're young, so be disruptive. Don't be a copycat, and work with others. If you have great ideas, don't think that you will make it all. Even when you look at Sergey Brin and his friend in their garage, they were two. They were not on their own. And don't be scared. Don't be scared to fail, because one day it will work. And if you're too scared to fail, you won't accomplish much. So I guess that's those are the main points.
Thank you very much, Oshrit.
Taking Eric's notes and adding, question everything you hear, especially in university, especially things you see on TikTok. Sorry, but I've learned that this is the new university, and it's unfortunate. Try to innovate. Maybe the comment of Eric of be disruptive. Network, speak with people. Broaden the horizon. And my last note was try for yourself. I think it's communicating with question things. Just try and practice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Francesco Bonfiglio, Oshrit Aviv, Eric Paul, thank you very much indeed for this really insightful conversation. It was a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you
you
for the opportunity.